So what happens then in the 20th century when it comes to mainline Protestant churches? We see that traditional Protestant churches, Lutheranism, those Calvinist churches, Presbyterianism, Anglicanism, have been in decline, dramatic decline. Their attendance has fallen off, and their stature in society has also fallen. Most people in Europe today do not go to church. And in fact, I believe I read this last year, that in the Netherlands on a Sunday, more people are going to Catholic church than to Protestant churches. Which in a traditionally Protestant kingdom, the reason why the Netherlands was separate from the Spanish in the first place for the Dutch Republic was that it was a Protestant Calvinist Dutch revolt. But we see actually that these mainline Protestant churches are losing a lot of following. One of the big changes religiously that's happening in Europe now is the immigration of Muslims. There is a large influx of Muslim immigrants. And if it hasn't happened already, in some areas, there will be more Muslims going to mosque on their religious days than Christians going to churches on Sundays. That's not to say a majority of the population will be Muslim, but it is to say that amongst the Christian population, very few go to church. And a large number are agnostic or atheist. How did the Catholic Church respond to this in the 20th century? In the late 19th and early 20th century? Well, rejection of this trend. And therefore, an attempt to maintain its uniqueness. And we see this, for example, in the Syllabus of Errors, in which Pope Pius IX rejects modernism. He writes this in the aftermath of 1848. He rejects all of these modern ideas like liberalism and nationalism and socialism. He suggests they're all problematic and tearing people away from Christ. The Catholic Church, with Leo XIII, Pope Leo XIII, his Rerum Novarum is a switch. It's no longer rejecting modernity, it embraces certain aspects of the modern world. What Leo XIII does is he says that both the capitalist industrial system and the communist system are wrong. The communist system is wrong because it rejects God. After all, Marx is the person that coins the term that religion is the opiate of the masses. So communism rejects God and states that everything is dependent on one's social class. Everything that one thinks is dependent on what they own and what they have. Their social class, not God. And on the other hand, capitalism and this industrialization has resulted in horrific abuses of the poor and the focus on money over morality. And so in Rerum Novarum he says there must be a third way between these two. And so he embraces unions and fair wages. And he says, basically what he does is he opens the door for Catholic, moderate political parties in Europe. Moderate political parties that are Catholic, that are oriented with Catholicism, because now the Catholic Church accepts democracy, that will be advocating some form of what becomes the social welfare state in the 20th century. They'll be advocating something like minimum wages, better conditions for workers, safety nets for the elderly and the poor, and things like this. Now, another example of Catholicism rejected modernity is the Vatican I Council in the late 1800s. At the Vatican I Council, the bishops that meet there promulgate the dogma of papal infallibility. And papal infallibility says that the Pope, when speaking ex cathedra, when speaking from the chair of the Bishop of St. Peter, or of the Bishop of Rome, the descendant of St. Peter, when he's speaking from there, he is infallible on religious issues, on issues of religion. In other words, he cannot err. And this is something that does not happen often. Most of what the Pope says, I think it's happened 3 times where the Pope has gone to the chair and officially spoken ex cathedra infallibly. But this shows that the Church is not sort of embracing modern sort of rationalism and skepticism, but still sort of embracing its traditional beliefs. Also at Vatican I, one of the Marian doctrines was finally confirmed. I think about the, oh goodness, is this, what is one of the Marian days of worship that we have? When Mary is born in without original sin. The doctrine of Immaculate Conception of Mary is, I think that is formally acknowledged and promulgated at Vatican I. In other words, we're not going to change our beliefs and see this. No, this is this. Mary was, born without original sin, and we believe this, and we believe the Pope is in charge, and these things. Vatican II is a sign of the Church compromising with modernity, right? So we sort of go back and forth. Vatican II ends Latin in Masses, so we see the secularization of the Catholic practices. And so we'll have Masses in the vernacular, and all sorts of other reforms. For example, many religious orders will have will not have to wear their garb, or will not have such strict discipline. And so this will result in a major change in the Church. For example, the priest who always before said the prayers of communion facing towards the altar away from the congregation, as if leading the congregation to some spiritual force, was reversed. So now he says the prayers of the Eucharist towards the congregation. And so it's much more of a viewer-friendly experience. Pope John Paul II is important, obviously, because he resists communism, right? He comes from Poland, the first non-Italian pope in like 300 years. He resists communism and says that, people have dignity, and therefore many Catholics within Poland resist communism as well. And remember, there still is, to some degree, that divide amongst the elites versus non-elites. Certainly the communist elites in East Europe are atheists, and many people, therefore, are religious in response to that, to fight against the atheist leadership. But Pope John Paul is also very conservative, on social issues. For example, contraception. Or, for example, premarital sex. And on these issues, the Church retains the traditional morality that it has taught since its inception, more or less, or since the Middle Ages, whenever. Okay, we're done. What do you mean?
You said he's conservative.